it's different from what we've known so far in Bridgerton. Sure, Penelope, she was the underdog and she was this wallflower, but she was still a respected member of society, right? Whereas Sophie isn't, And you get that perspective of what it's like to be a servant, to be looked down upon and be mistreated. Hey guys, it's Nina and welcome back to More Than Fiction. So, if you're new to this channel, this is pretty much a podcast about all things fictional. I started it with a friend and we mainly discussed like fantasy books, ACOTAR, Throne of Glass, all different types of fantasy, but also some TV shows that we love, some romances. It just like started off as a hobby. We decided that we were going to talk about all the things that we love to read and watch, I guess. And then, my friend left me because she had other things to do with her life and it just got a little bit too big. And I decided to carry on by myself, but it's been difficult being by myself. So it's not a podcast that is as consistent as it used to be. I still decided to carry it on in my own pace when I have the time, when I feel like talking about a book or a TV show, I'm not gonna force it. So it's not like a regular thing anymore, but an occasional one, you could say. And the last episode I posted was actually in September, and it was about Dexter, the TV show that I just freaking loved, so I had to discuss it. And now it's the same like with Bridgerton, with the book, if we're more precise, because the TV show, the new season, is coming out at the end of January. And I was just like, this is the perfect time to discuss the book. But don't worry, it's not going to be spoilery. This isn't a recap, okay? I will, give you a little bit of an introduction into the book so that you kind of understand what the vibe is. I would consider it as a preparation for the TV show, what to expect, what is probably gonna be different from the books, but not in grand detail. This is just like a Bridgerton discussion, treat it as such. If something is considered a spoiler or that I might consider it as a spoiler, I will warn you. And before we get into anything particular in regards to this book and this season, let's just discuss my relationship with Bridgerton in general, with the TV show. Well, I love it. Obviously, I wouldn't be here if I didn't love it. My favorite season is season 2, so I'm a season 2 stan. I just feel like the chemistry between Kate and Anthony was something unlike anything I've ever seen before. I was obsessed with them. I loved Daphne and the Duke too. I mean, that's the first season that hooked me at the end of the day. If it wasn't good, I wouldn't be watching. I wouldn't be continuing to watch the show. But there was just something about Kate and Anthony that will forever stay with me. And, in the previous season, in the third one with Penelope and Colin, I really hoped that we were going to get more of them, and we didn't. And I remember being disappointed. And by the way, on this channel, I also have a discussion with my previous co-host, and we discuss season 3 about Penelope and Colin. So if you want, you can check that out. But yeah, just short and sweet. I think that season 3 was probably the weakest, just because it felt like they didn't focus too much on the main love interests, right? On Colin and Penelope. I wanted more of Colin and Penelope, and I was disappointed that we didn't get that, and I was kind of scared that this is a trend in the Bridgerton universe, because when you think about it, season 1 was really, really focused on Daphne and the Duke. They were the main thing, everything was about them, and I love that. Then Kate and Anthony, we got less of them. There were a lot of side plots that were very prominent. And as interesting as they were, I wasn't really there for that. So that kind of bugged me, A lot of times when we were focusing on the Featheringtons, I was like, well, but I want Anthony and Kate, I'm not here for the Featheringtons. It's nice to see them sometimes, but not as much, right? And then in season 3, we got the Mondridges, right? A lot of them, and the Featheringtons, and Cressida, and Eloise, and as much as those stories did intrigue me, I just felt like there was something missing with Penelope and Colin. And yeah, I got scared a little bit, you could say, that this is something that's gonna keep happening. Benedict's book out of the Bridgerton series is my favorite, just because I felt like the drama there was drama-ing. You know what I mean? I felt like at the edge of my seat all the time. I was curious. I couldn't wait to get to the next page. After his book, I think it's Francesca's. That was a good one too. And it was so different. And I suppose that's also what I really like about these two books. They're different from the rest. But yeah, that's why I am a bit worried, because I guess when you have high hopes for something that you really love, that's when you can be most disappointed, right? So that's my personal fear. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, already from the trailer, I do see some differences, and I don't mind the differences, honestly. I'm not one of those people who feels like book plots should be followed to a T, just because I find that to be unrealistic. You know, a TV show is not the same as a book. You can't expect everything to be the same. You can just hope that the point, I guess, stays the same, and the feel of the characters, that they don't really like change their personalities too much, or the energy that you felt when you were reading the book. You know, you want that energy, you want that vibe to stay the same, even if the plot might be a little bit different, and if it's not like word for word. Let's now just explain the premise of this book a little bit. What's it even about? I mean, if you watch the trailer and if you haven't read the book, you can see that it has like a Cinderella feel to it, right? It's Cinderella coded for sure. And that's the first impression I got when I started reading the book, and I loved it because I love books and TV shows that take inspiration from fairy tales. I'm just one of those girls that was obsessed with fairy tales. My mom used to read them to me all the time. I watched all the cartoons. So that's something that reminds me of my childhood. Anyway, it focuses around, obviously, Benedict Bridgerton and Sophie Beckett. So Sophie, she is essentially the bastard child of an earl, right? And he kind of takes her on as his ward. He never publicly proclaims her as his kid. He never truly accepts her in that way. And before he dies, he gets married to this woman. And she's obviously, you can imagine, she's not really a good person. And she also has 2 daughters. And they don't treat Sophie very nicely. But, you know, as long as her dad's alive, she gets educated with these 2 stepsisters of hers. So her education is on point. She's not treated as a servant, you can say. But then he dies, and that's when things change, you know. This stepmom of hers treats her basically, like as a servant. She needs to polish their shoes, dress them, do their hair, all of the stuff that, and she's not even paid for it. So she's pretty much like a slave. She's not even a servant because servants get paid and she doesn't. So it's just brutal. It was hard to read, if I'm completely honest, the way this woman just abused her. Like it's like a story about abuse in a way, and it sucks. So in that way, it's immediately different from what we've known so far in Bridgerton, because, you know, like the 3 seasons that we watched, for example, sure, Penelope, she was the underdog and she was this wallflower, but she was still a respected member of society, right? Whereas Sophie isn't, you know? And you get that perspective of what it's like to be a servant, to be looked down upon and be mistreated. There's also a situation where she almost gets raped by respectful members of society. That's in the book, at least. We'll see if they include that in the show. And anyway, since this is a Cinderella coded season, it's no surprise that, and you can also see that in the trailer, she visits this ball, a masquerade ball, and there she meets Benedict, right? And yeah, the story unravels from there on out. I'm not gonna go into details. I'm not gonna really discuss key moments in their relationship or whatever. You're gonna have to see that for yourselves. I don't want to spoil you anything. But one of the first things that I noticed in the trailer that was like really standing out as different from the book is that they don't kiss at the ball. Like in the book, they kiss at the ball, but in the trailer you can clearly see that, you know, they're like wearing these masks and they come really close with their faces, and then the bell rings and they don't kiss. I mean, it's shown like that. Maybe it's gonna be different in the TV show. That was their first kiss in the book, you know, so it's significant. It's like a significant moment. And I'm kind of sad if they are gonna make it so that they don't kiss immediately. I kind of understand that they want to probably keep the tension, you know. Why would like they do it so soon? You know, why would they be physical so soon in a sense? But the thing is that Sophie from the ball, the version of her that he meets at the ball, is so different from the version that he then later on meets as her, as Sophie the servant. You know, these are 2 different people. So even if they did kiss at the ball, I think the tension later on that would probably happen between them as her in a different attire, in a different state, in a different version, it would still be there. It would still be happening, right? So, yeah, I'm curious how they're gonna like do this. Also, then the first time they meet, it's like a few years later after the ball. Benedict looks for her, for this mysterious woman that he met at the ball, but he doesn't find her. And then, like, years pass and they meet again. And of course, she's a little bit different, like her hair is shorter, she's skinnier, so he doesn't recognize her. And also, it's been a few years, right? And she's not wearing the mask. She was a respectful member of society. So that's something that's really emphasized a lot in the book too. How he doesn't recognize her, not just because she, does look a little bit physically different, but also because he's still a member of the ton. Even though Benedict is a good person, even though he like grew up in this family that treats their servants with respect, that treats them as people, and he doesn't look down upon anyone, he's not like cocky in that way, but he's still privileged. He's still this charming guy who everyone likes, who everyone wants to marry at the end of the day, you know what I mean? And he still couldn't imagine in his head that a servant might be the woman that he kinda fell in love that one night. Like, no way. He truly just can't connect the two. So that's like a common theme in this book that I really like because it's just so different. And it shows Benedict as this imperfect character. This book is very controversial. So, I imagine that when I said that this is my favorite one, a lot of people were like gasping, how can it be your favorite one when it's like Benedict was such a dick and whatever. I'll get to that later. It's controversial because essentially Benedict offers Sophie to be his mistress, right? Because like they grow attached to each other. It's not just because he's like attracted to her for the way she looks, but because he legit like likes her as a person, cares for her. But in his head, there's no way that he could ever marry her. She's still a servant, it wouldn't be accepted. And it's not just what the ton would think, but also that she would probably receive a lot of hate. That's where he's coming from. Like, everything would be more difficult for them. So the only option in his head is that she's his mistress. He doesn't even think that marriage is an option here, right? And the thing is that she says no, but he keeps pressuring her kind of into it. He doesn't stop essentially. And then he kind of creates the scenario where she has to go with him to his mom. Like, he kind of forces her, you could say. And people really take offense to that online, in the sense like, he was so manipulative. He was literally like forcing her to do this and that. I didn't really see it that way because I didn't, I guess, take this book too seriously in the sense that I didn't overthink it. And also, we have to remember that this is still a different time, a different era. We can't read it from the perspective of today's society and what's acceptable in this age and day. In that age and day, it was just different. So I didn't really overcomplicate it in my head. And yeah, he had those moments when he was like misogynistic in the sense, I know what's best, for you, and I will be doing it for your own good. You know what I mean? So a lot of people took offense to that. My experience as a reader essentially was that I didn't find Benedict to be offensive. I didn't feel like I needed to morally distance myself from him to enjoy the story. And I didn't feel like the book was telling me to excuse something horrible. What I saw was a privileged man operating inside a system that benefits him with blind spots that he doesn't always recognize right away. And what's most important is that the book knows that. It doesn't excuse it. Sophie, she's always aware of this in her head. She's always fighting against it. She is uncomfortable, and the discomfort is textual. It's not accidental. And the power imbalance between them is acknowledged. It's not, brushed aside. So that's also important, I feel like. This book is different because there's a big power imbalance. He's this rich man, member of the ton, and she's this penniless young woman, a servant essentially, that doesn't even know what her place in the world truly is, right? And it is acknowledged. It's not ignored. So that's why I didn't find it problematic. And also, I feel like some readers, expect romance heroes to be emotionally perfect by modern standards. And that's just not something that historical romance usually offers. So I didn't overthink Benedict's actions because I felt like the story already did that for me. I felt like it was written well in that way. What plays the most important part in this is actually Sophie. She as a character is incredible. She doesn't excuse Benedict's actions. She tells him no. She stays true to herself. She has this self-respect. She basically says no to becoming his mistress, because she's aware of what that might cost her, what that might mean for her, and any future children that she will possibly and probably have, since, she was also a bastard herself. So Sophie knows who she is, and just as importantly, she knows who she refuses to become, which I think is so important. And, if I'm completely honest here with myself, sometimes I was rolling my eyes and I was like, Sophie, just give in, just rebel for once, just enjoy something for once and stop overthinking it. But at the same time, the inability to escape her own sense of morality and survival instinct is exactly what makes her feel real. And it's that which anchors the story. But yeah, I think that in the TV show, they will probably tone this down a notch. I mean, I can only assume that Benedict probably won't be as persistent when it comes to, trying to convince her to be his mistress, and the way he spins it around so that she's kind of forced to coming home with him to his mother's place and becoming a servant there. These are just the things that kind of make people dislike Benedict a little bit when it comes to the book, because I honestly just think that people have a problem of detaching themselves from our current world and what's acceptable right now. Then it was just different and it sucked. Sure, it did. Thankfully, it's not the same right now, but it was the way it was. And I still feel like because of that reason, the writers probably won't risk it and they will change this a little bit. And I'm curious how they're going to change it. What I also noticed, like in the trailer, another thing is that Sophie's a little bit different. I mean, visually, yes, in the book, and I don't care about that, okay? In the book, Sophie is basically like this dirty blonde, I think. Her hair is blondish. And she's like just a white girl, and she has green eyes, I think. Kind of reminded me of me, if I'm honest. But in the trailer, she's Asian, and I love that. She's so beautiful. I'm excited for that. I love this when it comes to Bridgerton. It's not like a normal period drama, obviously. It's so different and refreshing. In the trailer, we see how excited Sophie is about going to the ball. And in the book, she was kind of excited too, for sure. But at first, her reaction was when her friend, the other servant, when she gave her this idea. I mean, she didn't even give her the idea. She just took her by the hand, sat her down, and she was like, you're going to that ball. And Sophie was just shocked, and she was like, but I couldn't possibly, She was kind of nervous about it, and she was like this scared little kitty cat. Oh, but I can't. I'm not a member of the ton. How could I? She was like that. But here in the trailer, she's like, okay, let's do this shit, and she's excited about it and she's so happy to be rebelling and doing this. So that's different from book Sophie, even personality wise. So I'm not sure how I feel about that because I liked book Sophie for the way she was. But, like I said, sometimes I was rolling my eyes when I needed Sophie to have a little bit more agency in the sense like, you're not just a servant girl, okay? You're so much more than just a servant. Because sometimes she was just really caught up in that bubble that she's a servant and she'll never be anything more than what she is. She had these insecurities in a way. And maybe it's gonna be refreshing that TV show Sophie isn't like that. But at the same time, I feel like that's what's so important about this book, that Sophie is a servant. She is a servant. As much as it sucks, she is that. And she doesn't have the privilege to rebel and to just act out. She doesn't have that privilege like Benedict, for example, does, or like Penelope does, or any of the members of the ton, she doesn't, and it sucks. So if they change that too much, that she's just like this rebellious spirit, I don't know, I feel like it does change a little bit the essence of the story itself, but we'll see. We'll see. I can't really assume too much based on a trailer. I think once the show is released, the season is out, and I watch it, I will probably come again and do another episode about it. Let me know if you want me to do it. Then another huge difference from the book is, for example, that we now know who Lady Whistledown is. In the book, at this point, we still didn't know. It was a mystery, but in the book, it's not that prominent. Whatever we get from Lady Whistledown is her publications, and that's it. We are not really discovering the mystery around who she is or anything like that. And I'm really excited, actually, to see Penelope in this role, that everyone now knows who she is. I think she's gonna be... she's already gonna be much more respected and everything because she's now married to Colin Bridgerton, whatever. She also dresses nicer. But also, I feel like now everyone loves her even more because everyone loves Lady Whistledown. As much as they're annoyed by her sometimes and offended that she, probably sometimes disses them and everything, they loved being talked about. They love being the center of attention, and it's gonna be the same here. So now everyone's gonna love Penelope. I'm excited for that. She deserves it. And Francesca. So like I said at the beginning of this episode, Francesca's book is another favorite of mine. And now, because this is a TV show and because they have to prepare you kind of for future seasons, obviously her story is also going to be a little bit included here. Now, I will spoil you a little bit of Francesca's book. So if you don't want that, skip ahead a little bit. So Francesca met her match in the previous season, right? John. So we saw a little bit of that. And that was exciting. And I loved watching it because they are so different. Francesca, she's so quiet. She enjoys the peace. And there were moments in the previous season when her and John were just literally sitting in silence, not talking. And her family was literally staring at them, being, what the hell is going on here? How will they get to know each other if they don't even talk? But that's just their process. And it almost felt like for me that Francesca found her soulmate, like someone that really compliments her and understands her in a way that her family never really did. So it was great seeing that, because the thing with her book is that we never get to know John in that way. The thing is that in the book, Francesca and John are married happily. They really love each other, but the thing is that John then dies unexpectedly. He has a headache, he goes to sleep, and he just literally dies. Super young. I got goosebumps right now. But it's just so sad that life can be that way sometimes. It's tragic, and she's in mourning, and she's also pregnant, by the way. Everything is just awful. But the thing is that John, he has a cousin that is super charming. His name is Michael. And Francesca never really saw Michael as anything more. She always noticed that he's an attractive young man. They always got along. They were friends. But she never had any feelings in regards to Michael. Nothing, no attraction. She didn't view him that way because she was just so faithful and loyal to John, and she just loved him so much. While Michael, he was always in love with Francesca. So when she gets widowed, they do eventually create a relationship, essentially. But anyway, my point here is that it's good that we're gonna see John and Francesca's backstory. So since we didn't get that in the book. But yeah, you have to be prepared that eventually John is gonna die, actually. And her true love interest for the show is actually Michael. But in this TV show world, it seems that it's gonna be Michaela. And we met Michaela, John's cousin, in the previous season at the end. And that disappointed me, honestly. The thing is that we saw in the previous season that there was an instant attraction there. She got nervous. And that's something that Violet was worried about when it came to Francesca. That what she feels for John isn't truly love, it's just something rational, because Francesca is so rational. So that she just chose John because it's the rational choice, because it makes sense, right? Not because she truly cares for him. And that's something that's not right. It's wrong. Because no, Francesca does love John, okay? In the book. And that's the whole point. And when he dies, she's so sad. So what I didn't like in the last season is the fact that she seemed instantly attracted to Michaela. She did wake something up in her that John didn't. And that's just wrong. And I hope that now that I connected to this season that's coming, I hope we don't get Michaela and Francesca in that sense that they're flirting and that they're obviously developing feelings or anything. Because it also kind of ruins Francesca's character for me. Because I want her to be loyal to John in a way. I don't want her to be harboring these secret emotions for another person, let her be in love with him, and when he sadly passes on, yeah, she finds new love somewhere else, which there's nothing wrong with that, life goes on, sadly. And from what I saw in the trailer, I skimmed it, I wasn't really paying close attention, but I didn't notice Michaela in the trailer. I just noticed her and John, and they were happy. So I hope it's gonna be like that. Maybe in this season John at the end of the season dies. We never know. And that's maybe the setup then for the next season, which is probably going to be Francesca's story when she and Michaela start their thing. Now back to Benedict's book, An Offer from a Gentleman. Like I mentioned previously, the main storyline between him and Sophie is happening a few years after they actually meet at the ball, but he doesn't know who she is. He doesn't recognize her. In the show, it's not going to be a few years later, because if it's a few years later, then, Hyacinth and everyone, they have to age them up somehow, and, it's different. That can't happen. So it's probably going to be like, a few weeks later when he meets her as a servant and stuff. He won't recognize her, I'm sure of that. But I'm just curious, what the dynamic is gonna be like in that way. I just really hope that people, that you, the viewers, whatever, that you won't dislike Benedict. I hope that maybe I convinced you, even though some choices were questionable, that you kind of understand him a little bit more and that you won't look upon him in that way, because I just like him so much. And even if we talk about TV show Benedict, what are your thoughts about him, like TV show Benedict? Because I love TV show Benedict. I think he's great. He's a great comedy relief. He's the one that makes me laugh the most, if I'm completely honest. Next to the Featherington sisters, like those two, like Dumb and Dumber, right? They're funny because they're just so clueless about everything. But Benedict, I remember in season 2 when he was really high and they were having dinner or something. Or was it in season 1? I don't remember, but he was just so high and it was so funny, and any interaction with him is hilarious. And also, in previous seasons, we got a lot about Benedict in the sense that what we know of him right now is that he's the struggling artist, right? He's completely lost in this world in a sense. He loves drawing, he loves painting, but he doesn't really know who he is, because when in season 3, I think that what he mentions is that Anthony was away on his honeymoon, and he says that he was actually happy because he took on Anthony's role as the provider, as the Lord, and he had a purpose, and that made him feel good about himself. But now that Anthony's back and that he's taking that role on, he's again lost, and he again doesn't know what to do with himself. And then eventually he gets into that academy, right, for artists, or is that in the previous season? It doesn't matter, just in general. And it turns out that he got in because Anthony made some calls or something. You know what I mean? So it's like he didn't even do it by himself, and he actually hates that. I really related with Benedict in all of these seasons, in that sense that we've all been through this, I've been a college student. You've probably been like lost in your life too when you didn't know what to do. I, as a college student, was focusing on college, and that was my purpose, to get through the exams and to graduate and all of that. And it was good. But then when I graduated, for a while there, I was like struggling, because I was like, what exactly do I want to do? The education I have is all nice, and I'm glad that I am educated, that I have something to fall back on, but it's not what I studied, international relations. I realized that it wasn't something that I really want to do in life. I always wanted to perform. For a while, I wanted to be an actor. I also wanted to be a host. And now I actually am a radio host, and I found myself, and I found it. You know what I mean? But for a while there, I wasn't even sure. And even though I kind of knew what I wanted to do, I didn't know how to get there, how to actually become that, right? So, that's what I'm trying to say here. It's so relatable. Even though I do remember in the previous season, I was a little bit annoyed by his storyline because he was involved with that woman, that MILF, right? I mean, like a very beautiful older woman. And I don't know, I would prefer if they just focus on Benedict and his struggle with who he is and what his place in the world is a little bit more, instead of him screwing around with that woman. I thought it was unnecessary, like we get it. He's a rake. He likes to have sex. We understand. He's a man, you know what I mean? Okay, fine. So I wanted them to focus on that deeper aspect of Benedict, but they didn't. So we'll see how his role, in a sense of like not knowing who he is and what he wants to do, will intertwine with this Sophie storyline. In my personal opinion, I think it's gonna go in the way of, so he's an artist and he doesn't really share his art that much with everyone else, and he also feels like, what is he gonna do as an artist? It's not something that's that well respected in that world. It's not like being as responsible as Anthony is, because he has to provide for his family. That's what matters, right? What does an artist actually provide to society in a way? But I feel like Sophie is definitely gonna help him understand that it is meaningful and that his work is meaningful and that he is good, because he's also he's not that confident in his work. He doesn't understand how good he actually is. And that's why he was proud when he got into that academy. But again, when he realized that Anthony got him in, he was like, again, well, I didn't get in by myself, so I'm not that good. I'm not good enough. And he drops out. And I think Sophie is definitely probably going to see his sketches, see his paintings. Either she's going to do it by accident or he's going to show them to her and she's just going to, boost his confidence, I think. I hope there's a scene where he does a painting of her, where she just like poses for him and he, draw me like one of your French girls. Or paint me like one of your French girls. That kind of a vibe. It's going to be like, hopefully, a season of finding oneself. And not just Benedict. Like, Sophie is in the same boat in a way. Because she used to be a ward. And a ward is respected. She's someone that gets educated and provided for. Then she became a slave. And then she became a servant. You know what I mean? So also she like is the daughter of a nobleman. So she does have that noble blood. But he never really acknowledged her. He never offered her anything really, so she's stuck in between, and she also doesn't know who she really is and what her place in society is. I can't wait for this season. I was annoyed when I realized that it's gonna have 2 parts. It's gonna be divided into 2 parts. What I usually do when it comes to TV shows that are divided like that is that I wait. I have that self-control. Yes, you can't believe it what I do. I literally wait for the 2 parts to be released and then I binge watch it. But in this case, since I am thinking of discussing it on the podcast, I will probably watch part 1 and then part 2, which is annoying. And I did the same thing last year because I discussed it on the pod, like I said before. This is also something that we discussed, me and my previous co-host. Dividing seasons into 2 parts is always annoying because you want to watch it straight away, right? Everything. But sometimes it makes sense. Like, for example, if the cliffhanger is something that makes you theorize. In that time, as an audience, we discuss it, right? And we go to Reddit and we have our own theories, what's gonna happen, who's gonna die, who's, gonna live happily ever after, all that shit. Because there are great stakes involved. And a good example of this is, for example, Stranger Things, let's say. Those divisions kind of made sense. But with Bridgerton, it doesn't. Because, like in the previous season, for example, part 1 ended when Colin asked Penelope to marry him. So he was like, will you marry me? And she gasped, and that was it. That was part 1. And then we had to wait for part 2. And the thing is here that, like, there's no cliffhanger, really. We all know that Penelope is gonna say yes. We all know what's gonna happen because we know that Bridgerton is a series of happy endings. Here, dividing into 2 parts for this particular TV show doesn't really make sense. They're literally just doing it because of money. I just wish it would come out in one go and we could just binge watch it. It's so much more enjoyable, right? Especially a TV show like this. So yeah, I think that's it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, like this episode, if you're on YouTube, right? Subscribe to my channel. Like I said, I'm not uploading regularly, sadly, anymore. It's just not possible, but I still am. This isn't a dead channel. I will still be back, probably for like this season of Bridgerton for sure, and then other books eventually. I just really have to organize myself a little bit here, and that's essentially it. So yeah, thank you so much for listening and see you next time. Bye!